I'm going to explain as many Elden Ring theories as I can today in an iceberg format. For today's video, we'll be using this iceberg as a basis, credits to the original creator, but I have tweaked it a little bit because there were over 100 theories and I haven't had a good night's sleep in a while since starting this video. And if you too want to see Elden Ring everywhere you look, then behold, Opera GX, sponsor of this video. Wow, if you had Opera GX right now, you could actually pop out this video into a floating adjustable square while browsing game builds, item descriptions, or I don't know what you people do. Simply tap the pop out button at the top of the video and you can stay immersed in your needlessly long video essay while you pretend to work, study, or fill the void with endless tab switching. Other NPC browsers are auraless. They have no rings. GX Mods lets you infuse your browser with whatever strain of fantasy escapism you desire. We've got animated wallpapers, live wallpapers, alternate light modes, background music, keyboard sounds, tab opening and closing sounds, custom splash screens, and custom GX icons. And you can mix and match mod components to create a homunculus that no one else has. For example, this is the browser of someone who is very well adjusted. Opera GX can also ward you with an inbuilt ad blocker to shield you from pop-up merchants.
My potions can do anything.
And intrusive potion seller ads.
I'll go elsewhere.
And a free VPN to let you wander between realms like Asia, America, or Europe, all while protecting your privacy. Switching sides is easy. Opera GX gives you an import tool to take over all your settings from your old browser, like history, bookmarks, and cookies, in a couple of clicks. It's even compatible with Google Chrome extensions. So install Opera GX now for free using my link below and give the best browser out there a try. Thanks, Opera GX. Now let us start at the top. Renna is Ranni. You meet a character at the beginning of the game who introduces herself as the Witch Renna, but she later clarifies that her name is actually Ranni. Now this might be a random fake name she chose because she doubted she would ever see you again, but Ranni resides in a tower named after her, Ranni's Rise, and funnily enough there is another tower nearby called Renna's Rise, which is quite the coincidence. Within Renna's Rise, you find the Snow Witch's set, which are clothes visually identical to what Ranni wears. To go even further, these clothes belong to an old witch who was a secret mentor to Ranni. The doll's body she inhabits was actually modelled after the Snow Witch. We don't know what happened to Renna, but she does live on in some ways through Ranni. Ranni orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives. When the trailer for Elden Ring released, one of the teased plot points was the Night of the Black Knives, a key event that led to the fall of the Golden Family. It was the first recorded death of a demigod in history, Godwyn. The trailer ended by implying that the perpetrator's identity was a mystery, however, she could have been standing in front of us the whole time. If you progress Rigier's quest, he uncovers evidence that Ranni was behind the plot. For all intents and purposes, she left what was basically a fingerprint at the crime scene. However, Ranni was not the one who lifted the knife. She hired assassins to carry out the deed on her behalf. She admits that she stole a powerful item to do so, the Rune of Death, which would allow someone to kill a demigod. However, nowhere in Ranni's dialogue or items does it confirm that her motivation was to kill Godwyn specifically. She makes it clear that she did this because she didn't want to be controlled or monitored by the Two Fingers. It seems pretty widely agreed that Ranni was indeed the one who plotted the Night of Black Knives, with a lot of pre-planning and her own testimony. However, there are other theories further down the iceberg to offer a different perspective. Miquella is St. Trina. In the base game, there were a couple of items that referenced a mysterious figure called St. Trina, and these accounts couldn't agree on what they looked like. Some say she's a comely young girl, others are sure he is a boy, and some believed that these clues pointed towards Miquella matching the physical descriptors, whereas others theorized that St. Trina was an entirely separate character. Luckily, many of us were delighted to see that in the DLC, they added a completely independent St. Trina character, model, quest, and great lore additions. It is confirmed in Shadow of the Erdtree that St. Trina is Miquella's other half. So, in the end, both theories were kind of correct. It might explain why people reported that St. Trina was a boy or a girl if the two coexisted as halves, similar to how Radagon and Marika share the same body but have independent identities, male or female, that they present as. Radagon is Marika. This was a reasonably early discovery in the game's lifespan, but the twist is nevertheless iconic to the story. A statue depicting Radagon will reveal this powerful 3-word message if you cast Law of Regression in front of it. The artist commissioned to make this sculpture apparently figured out this secret and hid it for those who had high enough intelligence to use this incantation. But what does the message actually mean? Well, it's pretty heavily discussed to what extent Marika and Radagon are the same entity. Were they two beings who became one, or were they always two souls who shared the same body? The classic sentiment of the two never being witnessed or depicted in the same room is true here. The most concrete evidence we have comes during the final fight, where we see Marika's body transform into Radagon quite literally. However, there isn't a massive physical change, as the two do share many physical characteristics like long braided hair and affinity for being topless. In my opinion, I do think the two were separate beings who joined together. This is supported by the law of regression, the key to this whole revelation stating all things yearn eternally to converge, as well as Marika having the power to blend flesh together. The technical logistics of the two having children, we'll get more into reproduction later in the video, but I do also understand and respect the theory that they were always one and the same, as this isn't out of the realm of possibility in a game that has duality as one of its core concepts. Gideon is wrong. I knew you'd come. Gideon is wrong most likely refers to his infamous monologue in Leyendal. You've been pooling your knowledge of demigods together throughout the game, supposedly helping each other in a quest to repair the Elden Ring, only for him to block your path right before the end. His famous last words are, "I know in my bones a tarnished cannot become a lord, not even you." Now, should you beat the game, this indeed proves him categorically incorrect. I have made a dedicated video on this exact theory if you want to know more about Gideon's shortcomings, but as a TLDR, Gideon assumes that no one can become Elden Lord because Marika actually wants everyone to struggle for all eternity. No one wins. In my opinion, it's a poor conclusion to reach, as I believe Marika wants to be saved and, rightly or wrongly, encouraged people to struggle in order to become strong enough to kill a god. That is what Gideon missed in his understanding. There was a purpose to all of this. Hornsent jar practice. It is a universal experience to love Pot Friend, but when the DLC came along, we saw what was inside the jars, and once again, jars are ruined forever. So in Shadow of the Erdtree, you are introduced to the Hornsent, a group of people who have a cultural practice that consists of butchering another group of people called the Shamans in order to get their prized flesh, which has a special ability to meld with others. So the Hornsent take these shamans, along with other people and things, and cram them inside of these pots, and then they would seal the lid and wait. And if that wasn't horrible enough, they'd also do things like wound them beforehand with rotting, disease-ridden whips to make their skin all broken and inflamed to encourage the oozing pus to fuse with the skin and blood to create one big soupy, I've got to stop adding adjectives here. But basically, inside one of the pot storage facilities, you see the innards of one of the pots burst out, revealing this tortured amalgamation of faces and body parts. It's likely these are failures of the ritual. But what are the Hornsent trying to successfully achieve with this? Well, they're trying to make saints. It's unclear whether the living jars are considered saints or successors of this body horror experiment, but the practice is needlessly cruel and not needed whatsoever, which leads me nicely into the next theory. Marika is from the Shaman village. The Shaman village is a DLC area that left a very memorable mark on all of us who played it, and it did a lot of heavy lifting to recontextualize Marika's character. This beautiful area is oddly calm. There's a couple of houses in this field of flowers, but all in all, there's really not a lot to interact with here. But what is conveyed through the environmental storytelling and only 2 item descriptions says a lot. The first is the source of the serene golden glow, a minor Erdtree according to the spell in front of it. This not only confirms that this place is or was Marika's home, but also that there is no one left. All the shamans had either fled or been hunted down, apart from her, and as a parting symbol, Marika cut off a plait of her hair and never returned home again. Gaius is an Albinauric. Commander Gaius is a DLC boss who rides an armoured boar. Throughout the fight, he remains atop his steed and does not dismount at any point, which is interesting, because one of the most distinguishing characteristics about an Albinauric is that they cannot use their legs, at least the first generation type, the more humanoid version. In fact, if you strip Gaius of his many layers of armour, you can see that he genuinely has no legs. And the really sad part about that is that his corresponding armour set does include greaves. But what a cruel joke, for he could not wear them. The same description goes on to clearly confirm Gaius was in fact a warrior of Albinauric extraction meaning origin or descent, so this one isn't so much of a theory as it is just straight up confirmed. Shabriri grapes are eyeballs. You can collect an item called Shabriri grapes and give them to Hyetta, a blind woman trying to fulfill her duties as a finger maiden. She claims that when she eats the grapes, she sees a guiding light, therefore asks you to help her by finding more. However, if you take the time to read the description for this item, it states that these are actually yellowing, oozing eyeballs. You have the option to tell Hyetta that these are not grapes, after which she understandably crashes out, vomits, and realises that all this time people have been pulling out their own eyes and giving them to her. The name Shabriri refers to the being responsible for causing this insane behaviour, a madman whose hollow eye sockets burned with the flame of frenzy. Those who worship these flames, it is presumed, would have their eyes also burn, and after enough time, their own eyes would melt away, much like a burst grape. Like the last theory, this one also is entirely solved, as despite its name, these are indeed eyeballs. Radahn's horse is named Leonard. Nowhere during the game is the name of Radahn's horse mentioned, but within the internal game files there is a particular model with the label Radahn and Leonard, so it would be logical to assume that this is Leonard. And what a fine, strong name it is. I remember when this was uncovered, the whole community just had this collective, heart-warming feeling, such a simple but impactful finding that pretty much everyone knows. Finlay saved Melania. This is a very popular one and pretty much a matter of fact. Finlay is one of the only named Cleanrot knights characterised by this distinct armour. At the climax of the Battle of Ionia, Melania bloomed into this beautiful but deadly flower, and after the demigod did this, she fell into a slumber. She was saved by Finlay, who carried her all the way back to the safe haven that was the Erdtree. And if you look on the map how far away that is, you can understand why this was such a feat. Not only having to carry a pretty large lady while wearing full armour over such a long distance and having to fend off the effects of the Scarlet Rot and any enemies at the same time is incredible. Funnily enough, in the early trailer of Elden Ring, you can actually see a Cleanrot knight fighting Radahn, so perhaps this is Finlay. Empyrean butterflies. There are 4 different types of butterflies in the game, each with a distinctive elemental identifier. The theory draws parallels between each butterfly and a certain character. For example, the Ionian butterfly has withered, scarlet wings and resembles Melania, who also has similar wings in her phase 2, not to mention her wings are made up of literal butterflies. The second is the nascent butterfly, described as arcane and with translucent wings. While this one is not as obvious at first, it goes on to state that it appears as if it's just emerged from its cocoon for its entire life. Melania's brother Miquella is unaffected by the process of aging, much like the metaphor in the butterfly's description, and a significant plot point in Miquella's story is that he becomes encased in a cocoon at one point. So if the nascent butterfly is to Miquella as the Ionian butterfly is to Melania, then what about these two? While one is quite straightforward, added in the DLC, the black firefly is described as black, fiery and cinder-like. Mesmer is strongly associated with fire and commands an army of black knights. Not only does he have a fire burning within him, but his crusade was characterised by setting fire to settlements, people and pyres. Additionally, the butterfly's description explicitly references Mesmer by name. Then we arrive at the last butterfly, the smouldering one. Its description is quite brief, stating that it's eternally burning and usually found near wildfires. The most important aspect is that it serves as the kindling. This word has been used to describe another character's purpose, Melina. She offers herself to ignite the Erdtree, and she's also found near bonfires. So why do these characters have butterflies? So as the title says, maybe they are all Empyreans. It's confirmed that Miquella and Melania are, in addition to their mother Marika, and also their half-sister Rani. Now, interestingly, there is this weird eye thing going on with all the Empyreans. Miquella, Marika, and Melania are all depicted with their eyes closed for one reason or another, whilst Rani has one eye closed, and the alleged other Empyreans also have something going on with one of their eyes. Melina is Mesmer's sister. Melina really wants you to become Elden Lord. She knows a lot of Marika's words by heart, and she does repeatedly reference her mother, who gave her purpose at the foot of the Erdtree. It's theorized that she is one of Marika's children, although Melina's physical traits don't immediately scream a direct relation, unlike the other offspring. But in the DLC, we meet Mesmer and learn that he is yet another one of Marika's abandoned children. Mesmer, much like his younger sister, bore a vision of fire. Let us consult the family tree. Sister Melania is all to do with rot. Sister Rani is connected to the moon. And that's all the sisters. Unless we consider Melina a part of this family, because the climax of her story is using her body to burn the Erdtree. Dare I say that is her purpose, her vision. So this item description could indeed be implying that Mesmer and Melina are siblings, and this goes back to the Empyrean butterfly theory, hence why these two got butterflies, just like the other twins. Placidusax has 5 heads. Placidusax is an ancient dragon lord with multiple heads. You can see 2 during his fight. However, he does appear to have stumps, which would suggest he once had more. There's a talisman that depicts an old dragon lord with 4 visible heads. If this is Placidusax, how did he go from 4 to 2? Well, famously, he fought another dragon, Bale. The 2 were grievously wounded. Bale lost many limbs and his wings, while Placidusax lost some of his heads. You can see 2 severed heads on Bale's back. The mystery might not be solved here, because upon close inspection of Placidusax's character model, there are actually 3 stumps, which would total 5 heads at some point. In the concept art, you can see the 2 intact, 2 drooping necks, and 1 thick stump. How the 5th head was lost remains unclear, with speculation that it may have just come off during Bale's fight but didn't get caught on his back like the other ones. It could have been a casualty of another fight, or maybe he shed it long ago, before that talisman was created depicting him with 4. Zullie reported that not only is there data that specifies the gender of Placidusax's heads, but also there is data for 5 heads in total. But regardless if it's 4 or 5, the big dragon definitely had many more. Godfrey. We don't talk about this boss. I've discussed Elden Ring extensively. I've defended its writing and naming quirks, but I can't defend this. I cannot defend, but Godfrey the Grafted in the Golden Lineage Evergaol uses the same model as Godric the Grafted. I'm not going to lecture you about FromSoft asset reuse because I really don't care about it, but this boss... Sometimes characters appear multiple times for plot reasons, like Morgott, or to tell a story, like Vike, but this one is just odd. He looks exactly like Godric, face and all, yet has a different name. But names hold a lot of power in this game. The fact that they are so similar suggests a blood relation if current family tree patterns are correct. However, they are the exact same model. And the only other reference we have to Godfrey in the game is this one spirit ash, claiming that a knight captured Godfrey the Grafted during the first defense of Leendal. This would explain why he's in an Evergaol, as these are essentially special prisons. The first defense of Leendal probably refers to a war where a sovereign alliance rots from within, traces yet remain of bloody conspiracy. I'd interpret this as meaning there was a power struggle within the royal family and its relatives, resulting in a failed plot to overthrow Leendal. Godfrey's link to Godric isn't confirmed, but his grafting hints he may have joined this alliance and served as some form of lackey. Finally, the fact that his Evergaol is titled Golden Lineage most likely means he is related, however tenuously. Celophus's basement. There is a hidden basement on Carian grounds filled with bodies. However, these are specifically puppets, people who were once human, now lifeless, waiting for their master's command. The one responsible for this is the ever-so-charming Celivus. He fully admits that the room is his and that he is a puppet aficionado, even offering to give you one of your own. Now, if that wasn't bad enough, if you go along with his special interest, you discover how he makes the puppets, selecting a victim, feeding them a potion, they appear to fall unconscious. Puppet? The process appears to be irreversible, and even worse, Celivus is a very petty fellow. He will target anyone. No one is off limits for him turning into a puppet. In the basement there's a puppet called Dolores, who you find out caused a rift between Celivus and Gideon. Presumably they were friends at some point, but she preferred Gideon. And now, she's a puppet. Celivus also wants you to make a puppet out of Nephili Lu, Gideon's adoptive daughter, as well as Rani. There's also a puppet of Selen in his private quarters, which is revealed to be a spare body for her to escape in later, so I'll excuse him for that. But why'd he put it by the bed, though? Godskins have serpentine features. If you want to upskirt the Godskins, you'll see that the larger of the two has a long, scaly tail, and the taller, slender one can elongate its upper body in an almost identical fashion to the man-serpent enemies, who are also part humanoid, part serpent. They were produced from the unlikely union of a demigod, presumed to be Rykard, and the elder serpent of Mount Gelmir. The Godskins look the way they do due to assimilating inhuman physiology, which in layman's terms means their bodies converted into, or absorbed, snake parts. Now interestingly, you do find Godskins in Mount Gelmir, so if we take the definition of assimilated, does it mean that spending enough time around the snakemen, the Godskins may have become part snake? This has been likened to the Crucible, as in all animals taking aspects from each other. This also may be due to the Gloam-Eyed Queen, who we'll talk about later in this video. Jellyfish spirits are dead children. The jellyfish was one of my favourite spirit summons, very useful against early bosses, great at tanking hits while applying poison, and even better, it has lore. Roderica is the one who gives you this item and refers to it as a poor little one. If you read the description, it actually tells you the jellyfish's name, Aurelia, which is important because there is a grave with the same name in the mountaintop of the giants. The headstone reads, "Here lies Aurelia and Aureliette, who never saw the stars." If you summon your jelly at this location, you get a visual and audible reaction.
Where did you go? Dear sister, you're finally here.
Presumably Aurelia's sister greets her and the two float off to the stars, which is a very cute ending, but it does beg the question, who would make a grave for a jellyfish? Unless they weren't jellyfish. The thing with spirit summons is that they are ghosts whose ash has not yet returned to the Erdtree. They're kind of in limbo, so it's possible that in this state between life and death, one might assume the form of something else. Perhaps these two children manifested moon jellies because of their unresolved wish to see the stars. The sister does make a point of stating how old they were, 14. Do jellyfish live that long? I guess it depends on what state in the life cycle they're in. Anyway, Abyssal Woods used to be a nice place. The entire environment here is overrun with madness. The people, the animals, the plants. This is theorized to be the fault of Sage Midra, who summoned the Flame of Frenzy in some capacity, but failed to become its lord due to being too weak. You find him in a derelict manor, bearing his name, but to access the manse, you need to find its secret entrance, and funnily enough, it's hidden behind a painting that depicts a building very similar to the one you're in. However, it's much more illuminated than the sun-deprived woods you've been going through. It's covered in lush flora, green grass, and a variety of colourful flowers. That is nothing like the Abyssal Woods today, and probably had a different name entirely before the madness epidemic. Rani's real body. Like I briefly mentioned at the beginning, the form we see Rani in is not her real body, it's her soul animating a doll, but her original body is actually in the game. It's in a sorry state, tattered robes, her skin greying and crumbling, but you can still make out what looks like tufts of red hair, which makes sense seeing as her father is Radagon, who has quite the strong ginger gene that dominates his offspring. You can also see a particular symbol on her back, the curse mark of death. The same mark is also seen on Godwyn's back when he was stabbed by the assassins. This mark was created after one dies, most likely due to the rune of death, which was imbued in the murder weapon. Blah, blah, blah. This explains why Ranni looks the way she does, her flesh literally turning into ash as it dies. Latin Bat Song. If you were lucky enough, you may have heard the rich, beautifully enunciated sound of Latin being sung in specific locations. This is certainly one of the strangest things in the game to experience without warning. All of a sudden you just hear this full-on singing, trying to figure out where it's coming from. And although you might not be able to understand what they're saying, you can hear the sorrow, the scorn and lament in their words. We really need more Latin in games. This culminates when you see who is singing the song, a fleshy, bat-like creature, but with human-like features from the torso upwards. They have long greying hair and a selection of jewellery adorning their emaciated limbs. But this was no siren's call, for when the lyrics were translated, it was revealed that these creatures were mourning for what once was. Oh, that land formerly blessed, now withered. We'd been destined for motherhood, but now have become disfigured. We wailed and wept, but no one comforts us. Golden One, at whom were you so angry? One interpretation is that the land was once thriving but no longer. The inhabitants have become hollow with no one to acknowledge their suffering. Why did you do this, Marika? Presumably Golden One refers to the Queen and the consequences of her actions, namely the shattering. The age of plenty is over, there is no new life, people cannot die, their existence is increasingly stagnating. As for what these bat creatures are, some say the song is a more personal expression of grief, meaning they mourn what they once were, implying that Marika disfigured them. However, I personally wouldn't agree with this. I don't think Marika has the power to turn people into creatures. She can, however, curse people in some manner or another, especially when she dislikes your powers or origin. We know that she hates crucible creatures. It is interesting because the bat people technically fit this criteria, part human, part bat, and perhaps even slightly bird or insect as well. If you look at the more bat-looking bat model, they have these circles that kind of look like what you would see on a butterfly or a moth. These could be crucible creatures, or they could just be a standard part of the Elden Ring ecosystem. Talking animals are quite normal, so why not singing animals? All in all, the Song of Lament is to scorn Queen Marika for their circumstances. The Erdtree is a parasite. This one I think is totally down to your own personal understanding of the game's story and world. We know for a fact that there was once originally the Crucible, where all life originated from, and it's referenced as being the primordial form of the Erdtree, aka the First. The Erdtree is also used as a signifier as a major event in the game's timeline, because it wasn't always around. It was definitely created at some point. The point in time was probably around the war against the Giants, as there are references to the birth of the Erdtree and the era of the Erdtree beginning. And the one responsible for the Erdtree is technically Marika. We know of her biases against the Crucible, so she may have re-established it as something different when she came to power. A DLC item depicts the two fingers cradling an Erdtree seed, referencing its birth. As Marika was chosen by the two fingers, it's probable she planted the seed in the Crucible's primordial energy, whereby the Erdtree grew from. Now, I don't think this is a parasitic relationship. I think the Crucible simply exists as this ancient divine energy, and the Erdtree is powered by it. Kind of like in real life, how a tree growing in the ground isn't innately parasitic. So in Elden Ring, I don't think the Erdtree is depriving the Crucible of anything, like a parasite does. I think their relationship and the way the Erdtree contributes and interacts with the ecosystem is a much more complex way than a parasite might do. The Erdtree feeds on dead people. As sinister as this one sounds, it's actually an accepted part of the culture in the form of Erdtree burial. In all the catacombs you can see tree roots with countless bodies piled high. Supposedly, it's an honour to be given an Erdtree burial, as a proper death means returning to the Erdtree, which presumably means rebirth. Such is the current jurisdiction of the lands between. No one can truly die. It is implied, however, that everyone's soul will eventually go to the Erdtree upon death, not only those who've received Erdtree burial. So perhaps this is more of a luxury to be buried directly in and around the roots, like a fast-pass lane that gets you sucked up into the tree faster. And presumably the bodies of the deceased are what fuels the Erdtree, nutrients in the ground. Numen are from outer space. What is a Numen? It's a term used very sparingly in the game. The first instance is in the character creator menu as a base template. One of the presets is called Numen, and it hints that they could be denizens of another world, which is where I believe this theory got the outer space part from. This would also be supported by the other reference to Numens, claiming that they are said to come from outside the Lands Between. However, the Lands Between does not refer to the entire planet. There are other places, other land masses. Just because someone's not from around here doesn't mean you get to call them an alien. We got more answers in the DLC, where we got this whole new world, in a way, the Land of Shadow. This could be the place that was being referenced to, as it's technically outside the Lands Between, and also we know that Numens are the same stock as Queen Marika. Queen Marika is from the Shaman village in the Land of Shadow, so it's likely that Shaman is an alternate term used to describe the Numen. It's still possible that the Numen could have originated from somewhere else, as they do have quite the supernatural abilities to them. They live a very, very long time and can manipulate their bodies to fuse and merge with others. Melina is the Gloam-Eyed Queen. The Gloam-Eyed Queen is a bit of a mystery. She's not a tangible character that we know of, but she has quite the feats in item descriptions alone, which has amassed her a bit of a cult following in real life and in the game. The facts we know about her: she was an Empyrean, she led the Godskins, she used a very powerful black fire that was capable of killing gods, and Malekith defeated her. However, we don't know if she's still alive, which leads us to question her identity. Is she Melina? This is because the definition of gloam can mean dusk, twilight, shady, gloomy. What colour does that sound like? Well, it seems to be a very varied spectrum, but a lot of people agree that it is a shade of purple, and Melina is revealed to be hiding a purple eye in the Frenzied Flame ending. It's right at the end she opens that eye that's been closed all game. Very epic, very anime, and then it cuts to black. What the hell was that all about? And to be fair, when I discussed this before, I think I was fairly against the idea that Melina is the Gloam-Eyed Queen, but now I've kind of switched sides. We've talked a bit about the special eyes that Empyreans might have earlier, but there's this one line in the DLC that Ansbach says about Mikola, that his eye is no mere morsel of flesh. It's proof of his Empyrean lineage. And I think the whole intentional framing of Melina's purple eye and it being the lingering final shot is implying that it is special or Empyrean. And if the Gloam-Eyed Queen was confirmed as being Empyrean, then... But what's Melina's goal if she is the Gloam-Eyed Queen? Well, that black flame was a real threat to the demigods. It's why Destined Death was locked away, so it essentially nerfed their ability. Melina helps you get to Farum Azula. She's even prepared to die for it, so you can defeat Malekith. This is basically getting revenge for the Gloam-Eyed Queen, and it allows you to unseal the Rune of Death, thereby allowing gods to die again, something which the Queen would be pretty happy about. Melina also says that this world is in dire need of death indiscriminate. I just don't know. Greattree before the Erdtree. Don't know why the Greattree stuff kind of bothers me. And people get quite heated about this theory. So, you know the Erdtree, hope you do. It's a big tree. You might call it a Greattree. The description of Deathroot describes what happened when Godwyn was buried and Deathroot started cropping up all over the world because of the underground roots of the Greattree. If you were to read this, you might assume that it's just another word for Erdtree. However, this item came along, root resin, and semantically established that these trees are different. The roots of the Greattree were once linked to those of the Erdtree. I guess that makes sense. I just thought they were buried deep into the Erdtree roots. But I guess this other, deeper, greater root exists. And that is supported by the existence of the deep root depths, where Godwyn was buried, and is described as being where the network of Greattree roots begins. Okay. So kind of like this iceberg, you have the Erdtree, and then lower down the Greattree. Apart from the fact that a lot of people say that Greattree is a mistranslation. Apparently in the Japanese text, the literal translation of these three separate kanji is Greattree root. However, this person claims that you would read this whole word as great roots. No tree. They explain this better in their post, and I am inclined to believe them and their insight on Miyazaki's ancient kanji usage. But where does that leave us? Well, it would imply that there is no separate tree, just that there is an existence of really, really old roots in the ground, possibly indicating the whole pre-Erdtree era would explain this image too. Would also link back to the primordial crucible existing first. Once again, everything returns to big fantasy tree. Patches is in love with Tanith. Well, get in line, buddy. When Patches moves to Volcano Manor, he confesses that Tanith makes him curious. Such undying loyalty to Rykard. Oh, she's so smug, proud, and beautiful. He does let it slip that he's never seen a woman quite like her, which shows he's intrigued, whether romantically charged or not. But later, when you meet him again, he does seem quite genuinely concerned with Tanith's well-being, asking you to return a keepsake to her, confessing it makes him sick to see her bent out of shape. The item is a pair of castanets, used by dancers from foreign lands, which we know that Tanith is. It's where she met Rykard. However, you killed him, so she's a bit down about that, and it's really quite insensitive to shove the castanets in her face and go, "Here, remember these? Remember when you were happy?" So of course, she dismisses you and rejects needing them. But this does beg the question, where did Patches get those castanets from, and how did he know their significance? He stole them, didn't he? He probably wanted to give them back to her so as not to have a guilty conscience, which I didn't think Patches had. But that must prove he loves her. Jar Village mirrors Shaman Village. Jarberg in the base game is simple and serene in the same ways that the Shaman Village is, with the same couple of buildings, lots of flowers, and not really a whole lot to interact with. And of course, the pot subtext. There is no one in the Shaman Village, as they were all rounded up and put into jars, whereas Jarberg only has jars. Vare killed our maiden. There is a general consensus that the deceased lady at the beginning of the game is the original maiden of the Tarnished. She's wearing the appropriate armour after all. But what happened to her? As astutely pointed out, there is a grafted scion-sized hole in the roof, courtesy of the nearby tutorial boss. So if she did get ground slammed, well, she did have time to write a nicely motivational message on the ground for us. That's just one theory. This one is that when you finally get into the overworld, someone waiting for you right at the door is Vare, and one of the first things he states is that you are maidenless. How did he know that? Is it simply because he does not see one by our side? We know the role of finger maidens is to assist their chosen Tarnished by guiding and strengthening them, but apart from that, we don't really know too much about the relationship between that duo, on account of us never seeing another Tarnished with their maiden. Either one is dead, missing, turned into a puppet or crazy cult figure, so we don't know what the typical dynamic or appearance would be. Anyway, part of Vare's quest is to collect the blood of a maiden, and one of the possible sources of said blood is that dead NPC back at the starting chapel, confirming she is a maiden. But why would Vare do this? Well, he does kind of answer this shortly after meeting him. He sounds like he's being opportunistic of your loss. He's a very good manipulator because of his patience and cunning. His duty is to recruit bloody fingers in service of Moog, but he does this to you by feeding ideas into your head, slowly, without being pushy. He reminds you repeatedly that you're maidenless, alone. But don't worry, he's there for you. He gives you the freedom to take in the world and what governs it, but when you show the smallest hint of doubt, he capitalizes on it and indoctrinates you. Thiolier is from House Marais. House Marais is a twisted family specializing in surveillance, executions, and gruesome rituals. In the main game, they're based in the Shaded Castle, a pretty cursed place and a poison bog. This is the first similarity, as Thiolier is proficient in poisons. The second link is the fact that the sons of House Marais are all sickly born, and Thiolier is repeatedly described as being utterly weak and useless. And thirdly, although not identical, Thiolier's recognisable mask and long white hair do bear similarities to the attire worn by the head of House Marais, also a face mask and light-haired plait. However, the two's dress style are conceptually different, but the theory is fun to think about, as it does explain why Thiolier distanced himself from the Marais executioner traditions, as he wasn't strong enough. Seluvis is Pidia's puppet. Pidia is an Albinauric servant tasked with caring for the Corian's puppets. We've already talked about Seluvis's hobby of collecting and turning people into puppets, but what if he was a puppet himself? I've talked about this theory before, so I'm going to quick-fire all the relevant points between the two. Pidia is pretty close in proximity to Seluvis, if that helps control him. Pidia just happens to sell a map leading to the specific item you need for Seluvis's quest. Seluvis has quite a suspicious pause when telling you where you can find him. Pidia reacts quite strangely when you meet him for the first time, as if he knows who you are.
Oh, you?
Seluvis and Pidia have the same voice actor, and most damningly, Seluvis and Pidia die at almost the same time. Ergo, if the puppet master dies, then so too does his puppet. I really like this theory, but it's not without its faults. Technically, when you find Seluvis's body and go to Pidia's location, you can hear his screams as he's dying. But technically that means he was still alive, even though Seluvis is already dead or inert. And Seluvis would be the only example of a puppet who's able to talk. All other examples of puppets are specifically silent. And if Pidia is able to pretty masterfully control Seluvis like a puppet, then how come he dies at the hands of his own puppets? Unless someone else, possibly Rani, figured out there was a snake in their midst and ordered to take them out. So maybe Seluvis and Pidia were just in cahoots, as opposed to one controlling the other. Corpse in Stormvale is a spore of Godwyn. So beneath the castle is this. Looks like a melting face, and believe it or not, this is not the only time you see this face. It's also found in two other places, and this is believed to be Godwyn or a part of him. You see, after Godwyn got assassinated, he was given the prime choice of burial site, right underneath the capital at the Erdtree's roots. There you find more than just a face. It's a body wrapped in blue fabric, with long golden hair and the same style of eyes and nose seen with the warped faces. This is Godwyn's true corpse, but you could see that his body has sprouted unfriendly looking plants. That's Deathroot, an unfortunate byproduct created through this sequence of events. Because Godwyn's infected body was buried in such a complex root system, the death component contaminated its roots and spread across the land. Ergo, these faces we see in multiple places could be mini Godwyns, his DNA sprouting into a disturbing new organism. Morgott defeated Radahn. Now, the power scaling amongst the demigods is quite an interesting topic to debate over. This one especially, all because of this one picture during the opening cutscene. You can see Morgott hunched over, his weapon digging into the chest of a fallen Radahn. Now, Radahn seems to still be alive here. You can see his hands clenching to stop this thing from piercing him. So this could still be mid-battle, as the picture alone doesn't necessarily answer who is stronger. But Morgott was able to hold the city of Leyendel through 2 wars, of which he stacked high the corpses of heroes, and presumably this picture is from one of them. And as we know, during the events of the game, Morgott is still there, faithfully guarding the city, so it's likely that Radahn and his forces withdrew, either as a strategic retreat or that he did indeed get clapped. And believe me, I don't want this to be true. I'm a big Radahn fan, but I'm not going to cope and say this isn't Radahn, it's just some other guy who has red hair and the exact same gauntlets and golden helmet. And sure, this version doesn't have those iconic Magnus horns, and the scaling-wise is a little bit off, but I've watched in-game simulations of how the battle would go, and it's not really close. Zerosh is the inspiration for the divine beasts. The divine beasts are the heavily revered creatures within Hornsent society, considered the messengers of the heavens. Now, we don't see what divine beasts look like directly, we only have representations of their appearance through sculpted keepers and warriors who call upon their divine powers. But the repeated motif is that of a lion. Sarosh is a lion, and has a pretty lofty title as Lord of Beasts. The beasts in question could be the beastmen of Farum Azula. I mean, that item description is tenuously connected to them, but bear with me here. One of the most recognisable elements of Farum Azula is the storm, and interestingly, the divine beast lion dance is characterised in part by channeling wind, which mirrors the tumult of the skies, of which storms are the pinnacle. There are definite similarities between the divine beasts and Sarosh. However, we know the Hornsent worship and descend from the Crucible, as signified by their horns. As such, the divine beasts aren't just lions, they're a blend of a lot of creatures. Sarosh, on the other hand, is just a lion, albeit an almighty one, so it's not confirmed what came first, the lion or the beast, or if one took inspiration from the other. The Erdtree is a mushroom. No, it's not. I will acquiesce, there are a fair few mushroom motifs in this game. The runes look like mushrooms, the ghosts have mushrooms, Rani's hat looks like a mushroom, Godwyn's face is a mushroom, Melania looks like a mushroom. While it is funny, I do think there might be a bit of confirmation bias here. I can say that for all of the theories on this list, but interpreting these visuals to fit with mushroom similarities as opposed to general fantasy and nature symbolism. Two fingers don't actually converse with the greater will. If you watch my videos, you know this is one of my favourite theories, and one I believe in. A very concise summary for those who don't know, there is this godlike outer being called the Greater Will who looks down upon the world, and in order to communicate with the inhabitants, the Greater Will has servants called the Two Fingers, and you can imagine a pair of fingers has trouble physically talking to us. So that is the job of finger readers who translate these messages so we can understand. Now if you're thinking, well, that sounds like an overcomplicated process, surely that invites room for error, you'd be correct. If you're not hearing something firsthand, the chances it's been misinterpreted or not even said at all are more likely. There are many who do not believe the words of the Two Fingers, dismissing them as senile, rambling delusions. But skepticism aside, it is explicitly stated that Gideon had an exchange with the trembling Two Fingers, bent with age, and discovered that all had been broken long ago. This could refer to the connection to the Greater Will being severed at some point, which would mean that all this time they've been trying to commune with their god, they've been shouting into the void. And the biggest piece of evidence we have to prove that the Greater Will is no longer around is during the opening cutscene of the game, whereby the anonymous narrator states that the Greater Will has abandoned this land. It's up to you to believe how credible this narrator is. Farum Azula was on Jagged Peak. So as we know, the Lands Between and the Lands of Shadow were probably once one big continent, but got separated. And as you explore the DLC, you find fragments of architecture that hark back to locations in the main game. One such example is where you fight Placidusax. It's a big, circular arena with ancient columns. And interestingly, there is another place with the same features, also featuring a dragon fight, Bale's Arena in the Jagged Peak. Now, if you're with me and believe that the DLC map can be pretty much overlaid onto the main game map, that gives it a lot of support. This would place Jagged Peak near to the Bestial Sanctum, an area that was kind of strangely situated in Caelid for something to do with beastmen. But if the Jagged Peak was once near it, then it gives it all the more credence. Now, what about Farum Azula? Well, as we know, it's a crumbling city suspended in the sky, but what if it was once grounded? Perhaps fitting nice and snugly in a crater left in the earth? Although it's entirely speculation, it would nicely explain why there is a crater in Bale's Arena, having once seated Farum Azula before it was mysteriously forced out. The crater could have also been made when Bale crash-landed into it after being fatally wounded and fleeing from Placidusax. Nox wounded Matyr with Fingerslayer Blade. So back in the base game, we knew that the Nox were planning something, which is why they got banished underground. A particular item perceived to be the threat was the Fingerslayer Blade, proof of the high treason and said to be able to harm the Greater Will and its vassals, aka, as its title suggests, it can slay fingers. And in the base game, we didn't know if the Nox had a chance to use it before their damnation, but with the addition of the DLC, we got to meet Mater, the Mother of Fingers. Now bless her, she's described as being broken and abandoned, and some people interpret this as being injured. Looking at her anatomy, it's hard to know if everything is in the right place, as she's entirely made of fingers, but she does look pretty bruised and cut up. Some people have theorised that she actually has lost a finger, specifically this ring finger, described as being a legacy of an ancient act of blasphemy. Blasphemy would align with what the Nox tried to do, hurt the daughter of the Greater Will. In addition, this finger is thought to have been cut from an ancestor of the Finger Creeper, which is perfect because Mater births Finger Creepers. The only thing that doesn't make sense is, why does this finger specifically have all these rings? Who blinged Mater out? Or who wifed her up? Where are Vike's great runes? Vike was a Knight of the Round Table hold, and no other Tarnished was as close to the throne of the Elden Lord than Vike was. However, he did not become Elden Lord, instead swayed by the flame of frenzy and succumbing to madness, but the fact that he got close is nonetheless impressive. Enya mentions that only one other person had collected 2 great runes to her knowledge, which probably refers to Vike, as he was part of the Round Table, so she would have seen him. Which leads us to the title of this theory. Whose runes did Vike collect, and where are they now? Vike is found in an Everjail and as an invader spirit, but neither drops great runes. For gameplay purposes, I suppose it would be a bit ridiculous if you got rewarded with 2 great runes should you defeat him, but even so, if they were represented as being ruined or unusable, that would at least give us some closure. It's likely that Vike gained the runes from 2 unnamed demigods, as this world is larger than what we are privy to. Maybe when Vike went to embrace the 3 fingers, the runes were destroyed. Maybe he discarded them when he abandoned his goal. Some other theories I've seen people come up with are that the great runes somehow made their way back to their owners, if we believe that over a long period of time those demigods in question were rebirthed, or the runes are in an unknown location, perhaps someone else just picked them up, or when Vike got imprisoned they were confiscated or reset into the world, or even back to the Elden Ring. To me, I think it's just even more tragic that Vike doesn't have any great runes. It's a testament that for everything he did, he has nothing to show for it. No runes, no maiden, no crown, only his melted armour, his dragon rage, and his melting eyes. Nanea is Shabriri. Nanea is the lady of Midra's house. I'm not really sure if that means she's his lady, but her relationship with him is very interesting. Whilst he was being interrogated by the Hornsent Inquisitors for his research into the Frenzied Flame, Nanea was there for him, famously telling Midra to endure. She could have been encouraging him to withstand the torture or bear the madness. Another meaning of endure is to suffer. There is something strange about Nanea, best illustrated in the pair's portrait. I really love this art. There is a lot of room for interpretation. What I see is Midra sitting stiffly, unnaturally hollow, with sunken eyes casting a shadow in his sockets. His mouth is downturned and parted. He's looking slightly upwards through his furrowed brow. I can't quite tell if this is a cry for help or a look of resignation to the gravity of his research. Does he know? Nanea, on the other hand, is glowing, a hand on his shoulder that reads more like a dominating pressure than reassurance. Her eyes are also shadowed, but not in the solemn way that Midra's are. They're veiled, and therefore her intentions are hidden. What is on display is the upturned corner of her mouth, a smirk, and I loathe to think of the sinister implications if that hand is indeed cupping her lower abdomen. So how does this relate to Shabriri? Well, the reviled madman appears to live on in other vessels. We've seen this with Yura, and there's that whole weird thing going on with Arena and Hyetta being the same person, but I won't get into that. But we do know that Shabriri wants to burn the Erdtree and burn everything away, so perhaps he had some influence through Nanea to convince Midra to become the Lord of Frenzied Flame. But Midra did fail, which might explain why Nanea is found deceased when you find her. Shabriri might have withdrawn his control from her. But I'm not fully convinced. Nanea is found clutching a dying flame of frenzy on a spinal column, which is all that remains of Midra. It's quite a sentimental token. I can't see Shabriri doing that. Also, Midra says, "I have endured enough, forgive me, Nanaya," and then transforms into his frenzied flame form, which would suggest that endure means to resist, and Nanaya telling him that would imply she didn't want him to succumb to madness, unlike Shabriri would. Hornsent Grandam created the Omen curse. I really like this one. Grandam is absolutely seething over Marika. She hates Marika, presumably because of the perceived betrayal when Marika ascended and ordered the Land of Shadow and the Hornsent to be purged. If you kill Grandam, she actually says something quite interesting.
A curse upon the strumpet's progeny, upon Marika's children, each and all. The curse of the Omen shall strike thee down.
Now, Marika has 2 children who are considered omens due to their horn growths, and what happened to them? They were hid in the sewers until adulthood, whereby one rebelled and the other hid his growths in shame. It would be really interesting if this curse was more than just words, if it was actual hex magic, if Grandam was the one responsible for Marika birthing 2 Omen children, aka Hornsent, of her own. Dung Eater rips your soul out of your ass. The Dung Eater has quite the reputation, known for defiling people and their corpses. Now, my impression was that he was more of a frontal mutilation kind of guy, but this theory posits that the Dung Eater's name is reference to the Kappa yokai, whereby they would take out a person's mythical organ called the small anus ball, so you can imagine where that was located, all for the purposes of stealing their soul. The Dung Eater's disgusting practice results in cursing people so badly that their children and their children's children will all be cursed and suffer. Roderica comments on the cacophony of spirits wailing around the Dung Eater and how many souls he has terrorized. Eclipse represents Rani killing Godwyn. An eclipse is where the moon blocks the sun. In the game, some believe that if it appears, it could bring a spirit back to its soulless bones, aka reviving Godwyn. However, the symbolism they use might not have that hopeful message. We know that Rani is tied to the moon. Godwyn, on the other hand, is all about gold, resplendence. Even his faithful gather at Castle Sol, meaning sun. They are opposites, and interestingly, in the present game do not coexist, where one is present, the other isn't, just like the sun and the moon in the sky. Rani lives on as a soul without a body, and Godwyn remains as a body without a soul, 2 halves that can't be whole. Godwyn's followers might use the eclipse as a symbol of hope, but it can also represent his unfortunate demise, with Rani coming out on top as she still has autonomy. As put here, what is an eclipse if not the sun being swallowed by the moon? Marika orchestrated the Night of the Black Knives. This is the more red-pilled theory about the events that led to the shattering. Don't tell me that Marika ordered for her own son to be assassinated. The main point I see people using is that the Black Knife assassins had close ties to Marika, and that they were rumoured to be Numen too. However, a racial similarity isn't enough to correlate someone with conspiring to murder. But it is interesting that there is a Black Knife assassin outside Marika's bedchambers. What is their business there? To report back? To guard her? Timeline-wise, it doesn't really make too much sense. The shattering happened some time ago, and so too did Marika's imprisonment. So I don't think their presence here is related. There's this ghost who talks about there being an unwanted child of Marika. Some people think it's Mesmer, some people think it's Godwyn. Did Marika really not want Godwyn, and henceforth killed him off in order to commence the events of the shattering? I really struggle with her motive in this theory. Why would Marika want to plan something like this? The idea of an inside job is quite interesting. Perhaps killing off her son and then trying to frame Rani? After all, that is her stepdaughter. We know that Marika can hold a grudge like no other. Just like how looking at her Omen twins might have reminded her why she hates the Hornsent, perhaps looking at Rani reminded her of Radagon and Renala's union. Is this Marika being petty queen again? Was this all a plan to play the part of a grieving mother, kind of giving her a justification to subsequently shatter the Elden Ring? Was Marika really 3 steps ahead this whole time in a Gone Girl style plot? Or maybe it's the other way around. Maybe Rani knew of the connection between the assassins and Marika, and and that's why she hired them. But it backfired on her. Maybe this is once again connected to Marika's desire for people around her to struggle in order to get stronger. She's never satisfied with sitting still. She always has to conquer the next thing, the next land. So killing off Godwyn was just her idea of how to start another rift. Astrologer Fire Giant Alliance. The Sword of Night and Flame hints at this interesting relationship. Astrologers who preceded the sorcerers established themselves in mountaintops that nearly touched the sky and considered the fire giants their neighbours. Now the word neighbours is pretty open to interpretation, whether it's simply geographical or more on the friendly side, who knows, and also if it was even mutual. But there is this one character preset of the Northerner who is rumoured to be descended from giants. So, pretty good neighbours. Anyway, the fact that the sword was created to commemorate the two factions' magic does hint that there was some kind of respect and peace between the two. Someone who did not have respect was Marika, who ordered the slaughtering and subjugation of the fire giants, which probably explains why Carian astrology withered on the vine once Marika established the Golden Order. She probably wanted to disperse any remainder of an alleged alliance between her enemy and the threat that is the fire giants. Blood fiends were demi-humans. The DLC added these giant mole rat-like enemies who are obsessed with bloodletting, but they actually might be related in some way to the demi-humans from the base game. So how did this become this? Well, according to some blood fiend ashes, there was a subjugated tribe, presumably the demi-humans, who discovered a twisted deity among the ravages of war, and they were transformed into blood fiends. The demi-humans are implied to not be too well respected in society, sneered at for their alleged low intelligence, so the tribe referred to here could be them. This is supported by other small details such as both creatures having red eyes, the tendency to roar before attacking, both dropping the string item, and their susceptibility to the alluring pot mid-combat. Now, all these reasons could be explained away simply because they are both primal beast-like creatures, but the thing about blood fiends is that they worship the formless mother. And another connection to demi-humans someone pointed out is that when night falls, their blood boils. This phrasing is curious because it would fit with what Moog felt when he encountered that outer god. Blood erupting with fire. Midra bred the three fingers at his manse. Some people have pointed out that in the discussion room where Midra was being held, the floor is covered in these burn marks, and if you look closer, you can see what looks like the swirl pattern found on fingerprints within them. There's also a very similar texture to what is seen during the Flame of Frenzy ending, and underneath pieces of cloth in the manse, there appears to be what looks like stony fingers, the same type of finger model you find in the finger ruins, along with these circular balls, eggs, finger eggs. So as part of his research making fingers, and somehow it got a bit out of control when he flew too close to the flame. Shifra River is the blue fairy. This post is incredible at explaining this theory. The blue dancer charm references a blind swordsman who sealed away a god of rot. Presumably that was Melania's mentor, but behind every great mentor is a great teacher. This blue dancer fairy gave the swordsman a flowing curved sword, patterned after flowing water. A blind swordsman is also depicted in the curved sword talisman. He appears to be wearing this headpiece, of which the description also mentions brisk water, fluid and flowing as the sword in the hands of its wearer. Just as still water turns foul, stagnation leads to decay. The blue charm references a fairy teacher, and one thing that connects fairy water and flowing is the Shifra River, as Shifra means fairy in Old Irish. So the swordsman learned his techniques from water, training under waterfalls and always keeping moving. However, it does say that the swordsman was given the sword specifically, so as the post states, maybe there was a spirit of the river who did this, or maybe the sword just washed downstream. Godric has storm powers because he has Niall's leg. Commander Niall uses frost and lightning as there is no storm element, however he does have this wind theme to his design and movement. He brandishes this flag standard, waving it and pushing out these pulses of force. He also moves pretty swiftly when he needs to, kicking forward. This is all because of his prosthetic leg. And as you can see in Godric's fight, he also utilises the storm. Now, I've talked about the significance of Niall's prosthesis, and when I first talked about it, I thought it was a translation error that he offered his prosthesis in the exchange. I thought Godric would want real flesh to graft, but I think offering a bionic lightning weapon of a leg kind of makes sense in a bargaining chip situation. However, we don't see this leg on Godric's character model, so it's likely Niall did indeed just offer his real leg. Gloam-Eyed Queen is a snake! So the Gloam-Eyed Queen led the Godskins, and we know that they have snake-like features. Now, some people have said that the Godskins are her babies. I think I've said this as well. There's this swaddling cloth item where the Gloam-Eyed Queen would apparently cradle newborn apostles, and she embraced them all. Kind of gives this motherly feeling to it. Now, how she is producing these children, and with whom, I don't know, but it is funny to think of this rebellious queen killing gods and procreating just as an absolute F you, America. Plus there's that whole line about snakes being viewed as traitors to the Erdtree, and what the Gloam-Eyed Queen did, killing a bunch of gods and turning them into patchwork quilts for her gang to wear, is pretty treacherous. I've also seen comparisons between the act of skinning, like the Godskins do, and shedding, like snakes do, which is pretty clever. Rani was supposed to marry Godwyn. I mean, this one kind of gives a logical motive as to why Rani did what she did and why she targeted Godwyn. The theory claims that there was to be an arranged marriage between the two. After Radagon left Rennala, Marika sort of adopted his children as honorary demigods, but we know that Rani did not want this. She rejected the notion of being an Empyrean and heir. It kind of matches her character to also be stubborn enough to reject a political marriage. The ring you used to become her consort is in a locked chest guarded by her mother, and on it an engraving telling you not to take it and that she'd rather be alone. She did not like the idea of getting married, so as a result she plotted to murder her fiancé, which is pretty dramatic, but it is in keeping with Rani's character. However, there's really nothing past speculation in this theory, but I do like how they mention when you get Rani's ending, the first thing she does is gladly accept you as her consort, as both of you have freedom and loyalty to one another, as opposed to someone else deciding for you. Humans used to be bigger. This refers to our character being smaller in stature than the average humanoid enemy. I mean, some of these bosses are double, even triple our size. This is most likely because of gameplay and perspective reasons, being able to watch and read enemy attacks facilitated by the scale of their model on the screen, but it is fun to think that the bigger and taller an enemy is, the more indicative of how powerful they are. However, the wording of this theory implies that as time passed, we've been getting smaller. This may be because we have descended from greater beings. There's a line that says, "Man has grown feeble in comparison to his forebears," and there was actually another reference explicitly talking about height that was removed from the game. In the 1.0 version, the description of the Pages set stated, "Those with naturally smaller physiques were considered to lack the full blessing of the Erdtree." This would imply that the Erdtree is part of the rebirth cycle and dictates our physical form. Gideon is right! I loathe to even say that, but if we try and examine his words, specifically his conclusion that Marika wants us to struggle all forever, as this person puts it, perhaps as Radagon and Marika are the same, maybe it's Radagon who wants us all to struggle. That's why he barred the way to the Erdtree and is hell-bent on mending the Elden Ring alone. Gideon may have interpreted Radagon's will as Marika's. Or Gideon could be right with the idea that Marika doesn't want anyone to become Elden Lord, she just wants it all to end. After all, we don't get the pleasure of her conversation at the end of the game. She is an inert husk, voiceless, powerless. Or, really meta, Gideon knows the game doesn't end because of New Game Plus, or because you're bad at video games. Maybe he's right. I mean, he does sound incredibly confident. He knows it in his bones. A man cannot kill a god. But I am no man. The Tarnished has ascended to quite the power level. A normal person couldn't challenge Radagon, so he is right about that. Radagon was a misbegotten labourer who led a rebellion and became a champion of the Colosseums. We don't really know Radagon's origin story for certain. He just kind of spawns into relevancy one day, which people do clock as mysterious. So breaking this theory down into parts, there has been a lot of speculation about Radagon's connection to the misbegotten because of their shared redness. And before you accuse me of splitting hairs, hair colour, especially red hair, has significant symbolism in this game, so whether Radagon created them or descended from them is up for debate. But in this case, the theory originates from one item, the brick hammer, wielded by a labourer who led a rebellion and later became a champion himself. The strength of a giant is required to wield it. The inclusion of the giant lion is quite clever because we know that fire giants also possess red hair. So if the person in this description is Radagon, it will give us a kind of crazy backstory. Radagon is referred to repeatedly as a champion. How it connects to the Colosseums is less clear, but if we are to believe that ritual combat is another term for fighting in the Colosseum, then it is possible, based on the fact that this practice was outlawed when the age of King Radagon came around. It's very interesting timing. Perhaps he wanted the barbaric practice outlawed now that he had proven himself. Outer gods reveal themselves through great suffering. This one's written kind of profoundly, but it is true. Categorically, all of the outer gods manifest through unpleasant ways. Rot. I fester. Chaos. I go crazy. Blood. I bleed. Fell. I ugly. But as put here, it's really interesting that people in dire need, at their wits' end, seem to invoke these outer gods through cruel, visceral, bodily and mental harm. This somehow bridges the gap into the divine. Pain is the only universal constant. Mountaintops used to be green. Imagine, for a second, boneless snow area. The old concept art for the Elden Ring map appears to show a white, presumably cold northern area, so it's not something that was planned to be green in concept, but possibly in lore. I believe the thinking behind this theory is that originally in the mountaintops there was the Zamor warriors and the ice dragons who harnessed the cold, so it's likely that if the mountains were their domain, it would reflect that element. The fire giants, also in the north, drove out the dragons and engaged in battle with the Zamor. Like their name would suggest, fire beats ice. So the theory is that presumably in the area of the giants, the snow thawed, revealing this alleged luscious green grass underneath. But because the giants were nearly entirely wiped out and their flame diminished, presumably the snow came back. Scarlet rot is important for the ecosystem. How could something that eats away at life like a vicious plague possibly be good? Something that gives you nightmares, makes you lose your wits, turn on your friends, turn to cannibalism. When in theory, when you picture scarlet rot, you can see it as something blooming. It's life, it's new buds, it's mushrooms and flowers. Those who worship scarlet rot see it as a circle of decay and rebirth. Although unconventional, the presence of scarlet rot can mean new life. However, as some people have put it, it can technically harm and wipe out the current ecosystem. So the short term, it's bad, but the long term, maybe. Mohg tried to recruit Vike. At first I was thinking these two have nothing in common, but if you're trying to do the Frenzied Flame ending, part of the quest is to descend to the Three Fingers, and on your way you actually have to fight Mohg, or an aspect of Mohg, as this is presumably where he was banished to as a child due to his Omen face. So could it be that Vike walked this same path as us? He also met Mohg along his way, and if his reputation preceded him, maybe Mohg wanted him for himself and his dynasty. Is Mohg one of the great runes that Vike acquired? Metyr hates the Elden Beast. If Metyr is the daughter of the Greater Will, does that make the Elden Beast some kind of family dog? They're both abstract eldritch beings. I'm not sure who came first, but I'm inclined to think it was Metyr. Is she jealous because the Elden Beast gets to be in charge of protecting the Elden Ring and she got tasked with endless childbirth? I did read this interesting interpretation that Metyr holds resentment on account of being forced to bow. But somehow I think that's more directed towards the Greater Will, especially as she was abandoned by her creator. There's no real interaction between Metyr and the Elden Beast, so I'm not too sure about this one. Godric knows about Shaman Village. Godric's final words mention returning to his home bathed in rays of gold. Funnily enough, the minor Erdtree spell you get from the Shaman village almost uses the exact same verbiage to describe Marika bathing the village of her home in gold. It could be a coincidence, but with what we know now about the shamans and their ability to meld their flesh, kind of casts Godric in a new light. He's infamous for grafting, attaching body parts to himself and others, and I think for the most part, a lot of us went, yeah, that makes sense, he can do that, explaining it away through fantasy game logic and magic. But if Godric is related to Marika ever so distantly, then perhaps he inherited her shaman flesh ability? Or perhaps he acquired it in some form of shaman catalyst if he visited the shaman village before its desertion. But on the other hand, maybe his monologue about a golden home could just be referring to Leyendel. Horaloo was a bear hunter from Roa. Roa? Rao? Raw. We know that Horaloo is chieftain of the Badlands, but what about another term? Highlander. Interestingly, beneath a painting of Godfrey, there's an item called the Highland Axe, describing the ferocity and bravery of a warrior's roar before battle. Sounds like someone we know. All these other links were really concisely and well put by this commenter. The Highland armour is very similar to Godfrey's. This talisman with the helm and axe mentioned Godfrey's long march. The axe talisman is found guarded by a rune bear, and the Highland set pieces are also found by red bears. The bears roar and slam in the same way that Horaloo does. And as a cherry on top, Highlanders are known to be hunters of bears. To them there is no act more glorious than the subjugation of a savage beast. Very interesting. So it's not totally out of the realm of possibility that Godfrey did hunt bears in his time. However, red pattern fabrics were allowed only to those who hunted bears, and as you can see, Godfrey is wearing blue, so, theory refuted, I'm afraid. Marika's grand plan is for you to kill her, so she can escape godhood. Yes, probably my favourite theory of all time. I'm not going to claim that I'm a Marika sympathiser, but it's just so tragically good to think about Marika imprisoned in the Erdtree all this time, longing for it to just end. I love the idea that when Marika commenced the shattering as the Elden Ring is inside her, she quite literally took a great big hammer and slammed it into her body. There is a potential for that to have finished her off, but she failed, instead left her quite a horrible existence. She's crucified, unmoving, unspeaking. There is no life or will in her at the end. That is someone in my mind who longs for it all to be over. All the endings, apart from the Frenzied Flame in Age of Stars, have you become consort to Marika. That's your wife now. Somehow I don't think she's too happy about that. It feels disrespectful. The point of grace is to lead you to where she is. It's meant to be a hopeful, motivational sign. Because if she was somehow able to convey, hey, anyone, please come and put me out my suffering, Radagon, the Elden Beast, or the Two Fingers, whoever, probably wouldn't have let that happen. That is not a message they want to project, so she had to get clever with it. The Greater Will and Outer Gods are all fractured aspects of the cosmic body of the One Great. This is all based on the ramblings of Hyetta, who, during your quest to meet the Three Fingers, starts info-dumping a bunch of terms you've never even heard before, like the One Great. She states that everything originated from this thing, but then came fractures and births and souls, but the Greater Will made a mistake. Torment, despair, affliction, every sin, every curse, every one born of the mistake. This does just kind of come out of nowhere, and the term the One Great is not mentioned ever again, but it's also implied that all these things, kind of like Pandora's box, originated from one. Romana is described as having found a twisted divine element, presumably the basis for rot. Rot may have been a piece of the One Great, which implies that all of these outer gods were once one. Alliance between serpents and giants burned the Erdtree in the past. There is a theory that the Erdtree was set alight before, and that's why it's considered a cardinal sin. There is a painting in Volcano Manor that appears to show the Erdtree on fire before you even get to that point in the game. However, it's important to remember that the Recusants are heretical rebels. They hate the Erdtree, they hate gods, so this painting could just be propaganda. However, people have noticed that there is a suspicious amount of ash in Leyndell, the city right at the base of the Erdtree, even before you do it, so where has all this ash come from? This theory would support why serpents are considered traitors, and why Marika was so hell-bent on wiping out the giants. How else would she know that their fire was a threat to the Erdtree if they hadn't tried to do so before? However, it does seem strange that there is absolutely no mention of a first burning of the Erdtree. If it did happen, how on earth was it kept such a secret that no one dared mention it? In my opinion, I feel like the burning of the Erdtree is simply a prophecy, supported by said prophets, foretelling of misfortune, and that's why they're so badly treated. No one wants to hear about the Erdtree being burned if that is what they were preaching. The fell god is the sun. The fell god is what fire giants worship, described as a malformed one-eyed god. The last remaining giant appears to call upon it during his fight, a frightening blazing eye opening on his chest. This is probably just an aspect of the god, but there are more descriptions that paint a picture of a being with curled horns. The description comes from this mask, which kind of looks like a more complex version of a cartoon sun drawing. The giants are obviously connected to fire, and what is a greater mass of fire than the sun? There is that one spell where you summon that humongous ball of flames like the sun that also references the fell god in its description. Also, this post does bring up that the Dung Eater's armour is malformed, used to have horns, and also features a big sun motif. Now, the sun is in the sky in-game, forget that I said otherwise, but it doesn't really seem to be posing a threat to us. So I'm not really sure if this theory is saying that the literal sun is where the fell god is based. Melina killed our maiden. Technically, the first person you interact with, although you're slightly out of it, is Melina. She does have the most to gain from being our maiden. Just like Marais, she's opportunistic, preying upon someone by offering to provide what they lack. She does have the power to teleport and sort of appear, so there's no reason why she couldn't have been watching us at the Chapel of Anticipation and then nonchalantly walking up to us in the stranded graveyard. We know she can fight too. Numen were artificially created by giant ants. There are giant ants wandering about the underground cities, and one type has a large, circular abdomen, and when you defeat this version, it drops a Numen rune. Some people concluded that the ant was birthing Numens, evidenced by its engorged sac, and the fact that Numen runes are quite rare to find. However, if you know your ants, then you know this is not what a pregnant ant looks like. This is probably modelled after a honeypot ant. Their bodies amazingly act as storage units, and when the colony needs food, the honeypot will regurgitate as needed. Therefore, it's likely that this giant ant possibly just ate a Numen, as you do see them feasting on bodies. The ocean used to be the original realm of death. It took me a bit to figure out what this one's trying to say, but I believe it's to do with the connection between death and marine symbology. Most notably, the fact that Godwyn turns into what some people believe is a fish person. You can see a scaly tail and glazed fish eyes. But this is not the only instance of death and the sea. The Tibia Marina are gravekeepers, their names basically meaning bone sea man, and their lore is all to do with guiding the dead. No reference to the elephant boat in the room. This may be a more in-between-the-lines reference to Charon, the ferryman of Greek mythology. Don't drink the water. People in the lands between forgot what sex is. I believe the entire basis for this theory comes from one cut item in the 1.0 version of Elden Ring, the turtle neck meat description used to reference boosting virility, but none in the lands between seem to have much appetite for it these days. In the lands between, the urge to reproduce has waned long ago. So it seems that people suffered libido death, or forgot that they could reproduce entirely. However, this description was immediately changed upon game launch, which could be due to the controversial hunting of turtles, or the fact that writing about reproduction was a bit too risque. Ranni is a cuckoo child of Radagon and Marika. Cuckoo here refers to the phenomenon where one may lay their egg in another one's nest, and the other mother raises it, none the wiser. In this case, Rennala is not Ranni's biological mother, as previously thought, but actually Radagon and Marika's child. Now, I'll be frank, this one has a lot of holes. Mostly the timelines wouldn't add up, but it does kind of explain why Ranni is Empyrean material. We know Marika is an Empyrean, and two of her children, Melania and Mikola. It's interesting that Ranni is considered to be a worthy heir, if we are led to believe she is unrelated to Marika. But perhaps Empyrean is not a bloodline thing, but rather a term used to describe one's power level. Personally, I cannot see the point in Marika doing this through the art of cucking, but cuckoos are a repeated motif in the Academy, so is this once again a trick for the poor, undeserving Renala? And with that, we are done for now. Who knows if I'll cover Elden Ring again? There's always something that brings me back to this game. There's still things I haven't covered, but if you want to share any theories you have about this game, please go ahead. The stranger, the better. Thank you all for watching and supporting me these years. Imagination and thinking outside the box are always welcome here.